In this problem, we're given several application problems, and we are to represent each of these application problems using subtraction, and we will write our answer in symbolic form in the first answer box, and then in the second answer box, we will evaluate our symbolic expression that we typed here to answer the question given. Make sure to note that whenever you're typing your answer for the symbolic expression, to place all negative numbers in parentheses. It is not necessary, however, to put negative answers in parentheses in the second answer box of each application problem. Let's do a few examples to show how these problems may look. Here we have that Hector had $15, but then he spent $3. We are to answer the question, how much money does he have now? In these problems, we will be writing a symbolic expression using subtraction even if addition would apply. So I'm going to say that he started with $15, and because he spent $3, he would no longer have 15, he would only have $12, and I get that because since he spent $3, you have to subtract $3 from what he started with. So this would be a symbolic expression using subtraction that represents the problem. He had $15, we subtract 3 because he spent $3, and then the calculated amount would simply be that 15 subtract 3 is 12, and that represents the number of dollars he has after having spent 3 of his $15. Notice that you do not need to put parentheses here because this is not a negative number. This is positive 3 and we are subtracting it. Let's do another example. Here we have that Miguel descended 400 feet. He was originally 50 feet below sea level. The question is, what is his altitude relative to sea level now? Notice just because you're below sea level doesn't mean you're actually under the sea. But for the purpose of illustration, we'll say that this arbitrary line here is sea level. He was originally 50 feet below sea level. So if he was 50 feet below sea level, if you think of sea level as being the number 0, then 50 feet below sea level can be thought as a position of negative 50. So I'm going to write negative 50 to start my symbolic expression. Now remember, we have to use subtraction in the problem even if addition applies. So we are currently 50 feet below sea level, or think of that as a position of negative 50 feet. So he's here. But then it says that Miguel descended 400 feet. Descended means that he went down further. So this means he goes down another 400 feet. So he is 400 more feet below sea level. So to figure out his new position, he was already 50 feet below sea level. He went another 400 feet below sea level. This puts him at 450 feet below sea level, which could be thought of as a position of negative 450. To write this as a subtraction problem, you can think of it as his original position was negative 50 feet, but because he went down further, we will subtract 400 feet, and then the calculated amount would be that negative 50 subtract 400 is negative 450, and that can be thought of as his new position, as he was 50 feet below sea level. When he went 400 more feet below sea level in the negative direction, that put him at a total of 450 feet below sea level, and a position of 450 feet below sea level can be thought of as a position of negative 450. Let's do one more problem. Here we have that Gabriel has a credit card balance of negative $90. So that would be his starting balance. I'm going to write negative 90, representing that he has a balance of negative $90. This simply means he owes his credit card company $90. So in this problem, we will think of a negative number as a debt. He returned some clothes that he had purchased that did not fit him, so the store removed a charge of $20. So think of the charge as money that he owed. So the charge was negative $20, but they didn't add the charge to his account. In fact, it was already on there. That was part of the $90 that he owed. So they didn't add this charge. If you read the story carefully, they removed the charge. And to remove something means you subtract it. So we're going to remove the charge of negative $20. So I'm going to write subtract, and I'm going to think of that subtraction as removing. So we're actually subtracting a negative 20. So think of this as the charge on his account, and the fact that we're subtracting it means that we're removing it. So he started with negative $90. Part of that negative $90 was already that they had charged him for some clothes, but they're going to remove that charge of negative $20 so that when you do the calculated amount, you can think of it as we have negative 90. Subtracting a negative can be thought of as we're changing the subtraction to addition, and then if you do that, you have to change the sign on the negative 20 to positive 20, and when you calculate negative 90 plus 20, you get negative 70, which represents that he has negative $70 as a new account balance. The question is, what is the new account balance? And if you think about it, it makes sense. He had a balance of negative $90, which means he owed $90 to the credit card company. But since they removed the charge and he returned his clothes, he shouldn't owe so much. So instead of owing $90, he ends up owing only $70. And owing $70 can be thought of as having an account balance of negative $70.